Okay, well, as Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party keeps collapsing, he continues to make what look like some pretty desperate moves to the point that they are confusing, especially with this upcoming election. What Trudeau has been doing recently, really a lot of it very over the line to the point where you would think that he's almost throwing away the next election. There's other signs that point to him potentially already knowing that he will lose later this year, this next election, and he's already trying to blame Russia in some articles that we've looked at. Meanwhile, he's trying to censor any other news outlets that speak out against him. They've been talking about this. This is a new program that they've launched, and they're now saying Trudeau government to release approved list of newspapers and websites that will receive federal funding. And of course, this is amid this multi-million dollar SNC Lavalin bribery scandal, all these other things going on with Trudeau, this private island trip with John Kerry, that Aga Khan island trip, that probe being reopened, that just being announced recently. So multiple investigations into Trudeau and his advisors going on right now. He's trying to cover that up with this list of approved news sources. There has been a lead up to this. Late last year, the Trudeau government announced this $600 million in bribes, essentially, that is going to what look like independent newspapers, what on the surface would appear to be, and this is why it's even more. Even more misleading by Trudeau than the funding that they give to CBC, who we have talked about here. Other people most probably familiar who have watched the CBC know that they get all this funding from the Liberal Party, from Trudeau's Liberal Party, essentially state-funded media that is totally biased in favor of Trudeau for the most part. Trudeau gave them $675 million in funding. Most people know that the CBC is biased, but on top of that, there's now this other $600 million on top of that, another $600 million that is being given to newspapers and websites that, again, these would look to just a reader that would pick up one of these newspapers like some local independent newspaper, and secretly they will be getting part of the $600 million from Trudeau, being one of these trusted sources. On the other side, outlets like this channel that do criticize Trudeau and other channels that do the same, Trudeau is setting up people to investigate them. They're using Canadian tax money to set up panels to investigate and monitor channels like this, and they will very likely, I'm sure commenters have had comments like calling them Russian bots or accusing them of things like that. That's what Trudeau is now already doing in the lead up to the next election, saying foreign interference is likely in Canadian elections. Trudeau is pointing to Russia as likely interfering, and they talk about this money that's going towards a panel to monitor and investigate online content that Trudeau doesn't like. Essentially, Trudeau's in Paris today, actually, to talk with other world leaders, including Macron and others, to censor more online content. Very obvious that Trudeau wants to control what is being talked about in the lead up to the next election. And even people in his own party, his party's collapsing so much that people are jumping ship from the Liberal Party. So people are very confused now with this promotion, this most recent promotion to the Prime Minister's office. But again, it is just one of the latest moves that Trudeau is completely miscalculating or just has no real strategy going into the next election. It's pretty obvious that this is a bad move, this most recent promotion by Justin Trudeau. It's one NDP candidate pointing out, Ben Chin. Before this, I talk about the CBC and their propaganda for Trudeau, just for more context, because Ben Chin, who this is the main subject of this video, is Ben Chin's promotion by Justin Trudeau. He will now be a senior advisor to Justin Trudeau. He's replacing other members of staff that have left over these recent scandals. Ben Chin was a former TV journalist. He worked at the CBC, among other stations. So the CBC is still, in many cases, covering for the Liberals and Trudeau. And of course, there's this long history of this sort of thing happening. Ben Chin worked at the CBC years ago, and then he went into politics to work directly with politicians, and he's been involved in a number of very big scandals with various members of the Liberal Party, not just Trudeau, but well, he will be joining Trudeau's staff directly. But before then, he worked with Bill Marneau. That was another member of Trudeau's team, the finance minister. Bill Marneau's former chief of staff. Before Justin Trudeau, Bill Marneau talked about in a couple of previous videos talking about Justin Trudeau as being one of several other Trudeau ministers that have been investigated for ethics violations. We're supposed to believe that Bill Marneau, Justin Trudeau's finance minister, who Ben Chin, who is now going to be one of his top advisors for Trudeau, that's who Ben Chin was working for, Bill Marneau. Bill Marneau had to pay a $200 fine. He's given a $200 fine from the ethics commissioner over his failure to disclose a French mansion. He forgot that he owned a mansion in France, we're supposed to believe. From that was Trudeau's finance minister, Liberal finance minister Bill Marneau. Quote here from a Conservative MP reads, "I guess that he expects us to believe that he's so rich that he just forgot that he has a private corporation in France and a wonderful villa in province. It's a little hard to believe." So he failed to disclose that he basically only after he was caught mentioned that this property existed. He only ended up getting a $200 fine, but just one example of these multiple ethics investigations onto Trudeau's team. So another reason that this is just baffling. Ben Chin worked for Marneau. Marneau is one of these people that have already been investigated for ethics investigation. Ben Chin coming from working for Marneau. He was also a key player in the SNC-Lavalin scandal, this scandal that's going directly to Trudeau now. This is possibly the most questionable reason. If you look into this, his background with SNC-Lavalin, Ben Chin, he was one of the initial people who essentially threatened Josie Wilson-Raybould over this SNC-Lavalin scandal. The former Minister of Justice saying interesting punishment for being one of the first officials pressuring Jody Wilson-Raybould on SNC-Lavalin. Ben Chin is moving to the Prime Minister's office. They explain it more detail here, but this was announced previously. As this SNC-Lavalin scandal was developing, Ben Chin was one of the first people named. So why is he being promoted after, just in weeks after this, as other people are having to resign and are leaving Trudeau's staff over the very same scandal? He's bringing in Ben Chin, who is tied to the same SNC-Lavalin scandal. It's just a bizarre move by Trudeau. Totally bad PR. I mean, the optics are terrible for Trudeau. Maybe Ben Chin is just somebody he knows will cover this up. Again, it's a terrible state of Canadian media. This is a former CBC journalist. This is somebody who should be questioning people like Justin Trudeau and other politicians. And Ben Chin has been at the center of so many of these scandals. It looks like covering for politicians. So this is what many journalists, so-called journalists at the CBC, end up doing openly in many cases, going on to work for people like Trudeau. Justin Trudeau appointed 2 new staffers to the Prime Minister's office to fill the gap left by the resignation of his former Principal Secretary, Gerald Butts. Ben Chin will be moving from his position as the Finance Minister's Chief of Staff into a senior advisor position with the Prime Minister. Alongside Chin, Sarah Goodman was appointed as the Director of Policy. Although he won't be occupying the Principal Secretary position, they say Chin, like his predecessor, Butts, was mentioned as one of the pressuring actors in the revealing testimony of former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould. According to Wilson-Raybould, Chin was the first to apply pressure on her office to intervene on behalf of SNC-Lavalin, not to go forward with charges against this company at the center of this multi-million-dollar bribery scandal because of their ties to the Liberal Party, basically. So Ben Chin was a central figure early on in that cover-up. Again, referencing this tweet here, Ben Shin, Justin Trudeau's new Mr. Fix-It. The same Ben Shin who was a key player in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. Ben Shin also worked for former Ontario Premier Dalton McGuinty, and had to give testimony over this Ontario gas plant scandal. So he was a key figure as well, Ben Shin, in the Ontario gas plant scandal that was essentially what took down the former Premier of Ontario, Dalton McGuinty. Same Ben Shin working for the corruption-plagued Christy Clark. Quote here reads, Ben Shin, Minister Marneau's chief of staff, emailed my chief of staff, and they arranged to talk. He wanted to talk about SNC and what we could do, if anything, to address this. Quote, he said to her, my chief, this is what Wilson Raybould had said of Ben Shin. Further quote reads, he said to her, my chief, that if they don't get a DPA, they will leave Montreal. So basically, if you go forward with these charges against this obviously corrupt company, basically that they should get off the hook. They shouldn't face justice because they might leave Montreal, and there may be job loss, was one excuse that the Liberals tried to use, which is a flimsy excuse to begin with. But the Liberals, as this whole scandal has been ongoing, have continued to deny. This is just an important point relating to the second half of this quote. It was Ben Shin that told the former justice minister, who is now left amid this scandal, he said to her that if they don't get a DPA, they will leave Montreal. So the first part saying they potential job loss, but also Ben Shin mentioned that it's the Quebec election right now, so we can't have that happen. So I guess the first part is essentially saying the job loss would reflect badly on the Liberals amid this Quebec election. But the Liberals, as this has all been going on, have multiple times their main defense, and it's broken down, but the one defense that they've tried to hold on to is that this was not politically motivated. That's what Justin Trudeau has claimed, that the decisions over SNC-Lavalin or the discussions with Wilson Raybould, they said that there was no cover-up, essentially, and then they partially admitted almost to a cover-up, but saying that it was to protect jobs and that it wasn't politically motivated. But Ben Shin directly mentioned the Quebec election, so it's obviously the Liberal story on the SNC-Lavalin issue is broken down on so many levels, but even the one thing that they've tried to hold on to in denying the political motivation there, it's pretty obvious that Ben Shin was politically motivated in what he was talking about with Wilson Raybould, or that pressure that he was giving to her. The second part, just closing off here, he said that they have a big meeting coming up on Tuesday, and that this bad news may go public. And again, that's all in reference to the Quebec election. Completely contradicts everything that the Liberals have been saying. Chin's alleged claims that SNC-Lavalin would move their headquarters from Montreal if they were not given a deferred prosecution agreement were later debunked. So even this job loss, this other excuse that they tried to throw out, has also been debunked. Everything that the Liberals have tried to claim, and a lot of this coming from Ben Shin. This is what Ben Shin is being brought in to replace, are people that have had to resign over this very same scandal. So very bizarre. Ben Shin also worked for Christy Clark, BC Liberal, the Liberal from British Columbia, who has been involved in a number of different scandals. She ended up leaving this position. So amid these scandals, they just break down a few here. In one case, BC taxpayers lost $43 million in one land deal by Christy Clark. Ben Shin also working for Christy Clark. At this time, recently released documents show that Clark's government sold off 150 hectares of land for $43 million below the appraised value, all in an effort to make a quick buck to produce her balanced budget for the 2013-2014 fiscal year. One lot that was appraised at $5.6 million sold for just $100,000. So took a complete loss, and this was something of just a PR move. There's been other waste scandals as well. This one case, again, going back to right around the time that Ben Chin was working with Christy Clark, or just after, I believe 2013 was just after he joined her staff. This scandal was going on in 2013. Government documents were leaked regarding a plan to woo ethnic voters. Some of the strategies included apologizing to different ethnic groups for past wrongdoing, contributing more to ethnic news channels. And one direct quote stated, quote, building political capital in ethnic communities by taking what will be perceived as thoughtful and caring actions. So they say there are two things that are very wrong about this. Firstly, building community, apologizing for wrongdoing, acknowledging and working with minorities and different cultures shouldn't be done just because you want votes. Then there was the fact that taxpayers were footing the bill for this apology tour that they were going to try to do to get more voters for the Liberals, or that was just one part of this whole plan. It was all taxpayer. It was all being funded with taxpayer money. Multiple other issues. Another well-known one, the controversy involving Nestle. Came to light that BC government is selling Nestle BC water. British Columbia's water is going to Nestle for whopping $2.25 for a million liters. So basically just giving Canada's water away to Nestle. That was another decision. Christy Clark was a key person making that decision as well. So that's where Ben Chin comes from. Christy Clark, Bill Marneau, and his mansion that he forgot that he owned in France. Ben Chin directly involved in pressuring Wilson Raybould, this whole thing that has set off this major SNC-Lavalin scandal. You would think that Trudeau would be trying to put this thing behind him. Very bizarre that he is choosing Ben Chin, given his connections to that as well. As they were bringing Ben Chin on to join Marneau's ex-chief of staff, they said that they appointed him because of his political experience and also his experience in news media, or his knowledge of news media, they specifically referenced as well. So again, just another example of how controlled the Canadian media is. Former TV journalist worked at the CBC and other Canadian news outlets. But Ben Chin, they brought on to the Liberal Party because he has experience basically controlling the news. And on the other hand, CBC is trying to, or Justin Trudeau's government is trying to shut down any government that, any opinion that falls out of the government-funded CBC narrative. So it seems very desperate, the measures that Justin Trudeau is taking, very much over the line and just very obvious in the corruption, bringing somebody from the corporate news to use his news media experience as Justin Trudeau is trying to censor everybody and giving away $600 million bribes to the CBC and $600 million again to so-called independent newspapers, or newspapers basically to mislead people into picking up a local newspaper that looks like it's independent and it's actually stamped by Ben Chin and the Liberal Party. Let me know what you think. It's a lot of different things going back with Ben Chin, and just so many scandals going on with Justin Trudeau's and the Liberal Party currently. Let me know what you think, though, about this info. Obviously, continue to follow this as we get closer to the Canadian election. This is happening this year. This will be coming up. Be interesting to see how all this affects the election. Let me know what you think. I do have a link to my Patreon account in the video description, patreon.com/realityreader. You can support the channel over there. You can also support the channel directly at PayPal, paypal.me/realityreader. Even $1 or $2 makes a huge difference, helps me keep talking about these issues. And link to the original article. Look at that in full. I'll follow up soon. Thanks, everyone.